So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Ronnie Shroff. I'm from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And my presentation today is on the conceptualization, measurement, and preliminary validation of students' collaborative, problem-based learning and peer assessment strategies using interactive whiteboards. Okay, so for the outline of my presentation, I'm firstly going to examine some of the theoretical foundations of this novel signature pedagogy that we've actually termed or coined COBLA-PA. That is collaborative problem-based learning with peer assessment. Next on, I'm going to look at the report and design of the instrument development process. What do I mean by that? I'm actually going to look at how we measured students' collaborative problem-based learning and peer assessment strategies using these interactive whiteboards. And lastly, I'm also going to look at how we generated the survey items from a comprehensive review of the literature, as well as a three-stage card sorting process to ascertain the reliability and the validity of the instrument. What do I mean by that? I mean, we're actually looking at whether the instrument measures what it is intended to measure. That is collaborative problem-based learning and peer assessment strategies. This is also research in progress. So I'm mainly going to focus on the conceptualization, how we conceptualize this model, and also the instrument development process. We're also in the stage of data collection. So I'm not actually going to go through that part in this presentation, as we're still in the process of collecting data. Okay, so first of all, it's very important to actually look at the contributions to the scholarship of teaching and learning. Okay, first of all, why do we want to conduct this type of research in collaborative problem-based learning strategies with peer assessment? First of all, we want to evaluate and explore some of the innovative ways to support active learning, because our project at the Hong Kong Polytechnic is all about active learning, and it's also about engaging students in high cognitive thinking skills, using those 21st century skills, looking at problem solving, synthesis, analysis, all those types of high order thinking skills that are on Bloom's taxonomy. We also want to advance our understanding of what matters in active learning, and also want to catalyze innovative as well as catalyze innovation and improvement in our teaching and learning practices by using these types of innovative pedagogies, which really informs whether students really enjoy using these types of innovative pedagogies. Are they interacting? Are they engaging as well in the learning process? And finally, we want to facilitate the study of new approaches. So this is really what collaborative problem or the COBLA-PA framework or approach is really about. And again, it also leads to publications in the scholarship of teaching and learning. So probably thinking, so what are some of the considerations in using a developed instrument? Okay, so first of all, we were unable to locate scales or inventories that were specifically related to measuring students' COBLA-PA strategies in a technology-supported learning context. So for example, you've heard of all these buzzwords, peer instruction by Eric Mazur from Harvard, flipped classroom methodologies. But this is a little bit different, because what we're doing is we actually have a unified COBLA-PA strategy where we're unifying each or bringing these elements of collaboration, problem solving, and peer assessment into the framework, and actually designing some activities around this framework using interactive whiteboards. Again, another consideration for using a developed instrument is that we have gaps or absences in the development of a reliable and valid instrument to gather and represent data on students' collaborative problem-solving strategies with peer assessment. Of course, there are there's so many different types of assessments and instruments that measure collaboration, problem-solving strategies, but there are a lot of these instruments are mostly individualized. They don't bring holistically this pedagogy that we've actually come up with, this COBLA-PA pedagogy. So basically, without a reliable and valid instrument, it would be virtually impossible to benchmark new pedagogical techniques, okay, or provide feedback to instructors for improving classroom performance. So you're probably wondering, okay, so give you some background of what this all means. Collaborative problem-based learning and peer assessment strategies are central to group interaction. Okay, it's also shown in the literature and in the research that it really enhances student intrinsic motivation. Okay, all those motivational constructs that we're familiar with, like immersion, the degree of interest, how challenged students are, the degree of exploratory behavior, and it also facilitates achievement and performance. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, this also leads to increasing students' learning gains, performance at both the individual and group level. Next, we're also looking at the collaborative and problem-based learning approaches that have also received considerable attention in the literature as well when you look back. Okay, again, it's really about developing students' critical thinking, interaction, problem-solving skills. And then lastly, we have this whole group assessment, peer assessment, where students actually form groups and they peer assess as well of the other group members. And this actually takes place in a collaborative instructional process. So this is really just the background to what CoLAP is really all about. Okay, so there are 4 steps that we've come up in this novel pedagogy, CoLAP. Okay, it combines group collaboration, problem solving, peer assessment with the use of these interactive tools. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use interactive whiteboards. You can use other forms of interactive technology enhanced tools as well. So this CoLAP is based on a 4-step process, as you can see. Okay, so basically the instructor students formulate questions for the groups. Ideally, also the students can formulate their own questions. Okay, the second part of the second stage is really discussing and answering questions from each other's groups. And you can see exemplars of this shown below. The third stage is to peer assess and evaluate other groups' answers, which is great because the instructor really is a guide on the side and the students are really taking initiative or accountability for their own learning trajectory, their own learning outcomes again as well. And then the last part is really about also again instructor feedback. Okay, so this is really a 4-step process allowing students to engage in peer assessment. So it's a social learning process as well that allows for feedback. Okay, so why the need for an instrument? Okay, so looking back at the literature, there was really no comprehensive instrument that measures these aspects of collaborative problem-based learning and peer assessment strategies. And there are a number of practical reasons as well for developing an instrument. First of all, the CoLAP strategies support higher order cognitive skills in technology-rich learning contexts. Secondly, feedback from the students is also effective in CoLAP because it really allows for improvements from an instructional design perspective in the course design. And thirdly, development will also inform future research regarding implications of theory, and more importantly, the practice as well of using this type of novel pedagogy within a learning context or learning environment. Okay, collaborative processes, problem-based learning, as well as the peer assessment part of it as well. Okay, so what is the CoLAP conceptual framework? Well, when you start going back into the literature and you start looking at collaborative problem-based learning and you start looking at feedback and some of the constructs that come out of these variables, then you're able to actually lay a conceptual theoretical foundation of what this CoLAP framework is really all about. So it really is a matter of going back to the literature, looking and reviewing the literature, and then identifying, not only looking at some of the instruments that were also developed to measure collaborative learning, for example, and then generating a list of constructs and coming up with a framework. So here we have the different constructs, 4 constructs: capacity to collaborate, readiness to engage, task-based interest, and peer feedback usefulness. Okay, and these 4 constructs really form the basis of our instrument development process. Okay, so going through each of these constructs very quickly, capacity to collaborate really is all about the learner's propensity to work together in a task-based learning environment in groups. So it's really about the joint construction of understanding collectively as a group, and it's also, again, coordinating these activities towards a shared goal. Our second construct is really about students' readiness, okay? Also an intrinsic motivation driver, their readiness to engage in the learning process. Okay, this is about learners' self-perception of a sense of connectedness and involvement through the use of these types of group interactions and activities. It also refers to the extent to which the learner is able to connect with what they learn, how they learn, and whom they learn with. So again, this readiness to engage is also a group dynamic process. A very interesting, very important aspect of collaborative problem-based learning, this COBLAPA framework, is also task-based interest. It's also an intrinsic motivational variable for students to be able to participate in intellectually challenging tasks. If the task is too simple, there's not going to be the type of deep learning outcomes that we would like. So there's going to be a degree of challenge within these tasks that also evoke a sense of interest, enjoyment, the degree of curiosity, all those types of important intrinsic factors. And then lastly, feedback, peer feedback, of course, very critical as well, because Eric Mazzeo also used this in his instantaneous feedback assessment technique that he used, where groups were also evaluating each other's. So individual feedback is really about providing constructive comments and evaluative feedback on the peers' work. Okay, so it's really about the learner's subjective assessment and perceived expected positive benefits as well of the peer feedback. Okay, now we move on to the instrument development process, which really comprises of using a three-stage development process. This has been used widely, not only in IS research, information systems research can be applied in numerous disciplines and fields. So it's a very rigorous process as such. So typically when you actually publish a paper, you don't usually get reviewers that come back to you and challenge you on the development process, because it's so rigorous and goes through this rigorous process. Okay, so the objective is to refine the items of the constructs of the instrument. And it's really about a three-stage process. The first stage is item creation, which is the purpose is to create a pool of items to fit the construct definitions. The second part is scale development. Okay, this is where you have a panel of judges that sort through the respective items into separate categories. Again, you have to develop these items based on the constructs of theoretical framework, as well as looking back at the literature. Okay, so what it is you want to measure. And then the last part is the instrument testing process. This is the various items and scales are then combined into an overall instrument. So stage one is the item creation process. This involves the generation of an initial pool of items. And as you can see, we have a table of the different, 4 different constructs with the items for each of these constructs. The pool of items was developed based on the factors constructs identified in our study, with at least 4 to 5 items per construct. After the item pools were created, we then evaluated to eliminate those which were appeared redundant or ambiguous. What does that mean? That means those which might have not loaded, might have not loaded correctly, or might have loaded onto more than one construct. Okay, stage 2 is the scale development process. Okay, this is where the judges, the goal of this stage is really twofold: to assess the construct validity, that is, are you measuring what you intend to measure, and also of the scales being developed, and also to determine if any of the items that you've developed are ambiguous. So basically the judges are not told what the underlying constructs are, but asked to provide their own labels of the constructs. So this basically verifies the construct validity of the scales. And then also the judges are asked to sort the items into construct categories as well. Okay, so here we have an example of an item placement ratio. What does this mean? It basically is a judge's classification of how that judge places those items within a certain category. So for example, if you look at this table, you can see that attention is given to those items that are off diagonal. So any items that are poorly vague, that are poorly worded or tapped, non-intended constructs were identified. So based on these placements by the judges, the items were then re-examined for any inappropriately worded or ambiguous items. Okay, so looking back at this table, the examination of the resulting placement shows a high degree agreement between the judges in the first round, indicating indicating an improvement in the placement. So for example, if your item placement or overall hit ratio is low, then you might want to conduct another round again until you ascertain a level of agreeability within the judges, so your overall hit ratio goes up. This means the rewarded items are actually matched by all 4 judges in the second round. So this basically led to an overall hit ratio of 96%. What does this mean? It means that, that the constructs obtained a high placement ratio, thereby indicating a high degree of construct validity. Okay, so this instrument development test, the last stage, which I'm not going to really get into because as I mentioned to you, we're still in the process of collecting data. I'm also doing a small scale studies. But basically instrument testing is comprised of a process to conduct an initial pilot test of the developed instrument. We also can, because this is just instrument development and it's just a pilot study, we can also keep the sample size relatively small. Okay, we also want to ascertain the reliability assessed through Cronbach's alpha. Okay, so any alpha value that exceeds 0.70 is typically a good reliability estimate. Okay, and this last part of this research study is really to conduct a full-scale study of this instrument as well. Okay, so this pretty much wraps up my presentation. Any questions?
Yes, is there any questions from the floor? May I ask a question? Why did you choose to focus on these 3 components?
Okay, you mean the COBLA-PAR framework?
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Ting, who is the project leader of the PALMS project here on active learning, actually came up with this novel pedagogy because he's actually trialing it and using it in his calculus class, a pre-calculus class that he teaches here in the Department of Applied Mathematics, and it's worked very well for him. He's seen the benefits that the students use from this type of pedagogy because again, you're actually bringing the students in to work collaboratively. You're engaging them in the problem solving process where they're using their higher cognitive thinking skills, but then you're also giving them accountability for their own learning because they're the ones that are actually at the end of the day, maybe with using this process are also involved in the instructional design. For example, developing their own set of questions and then giving it to another group to answer. So there's an element of challenge as well between groups to be able to problem solve, and then having this peer feedback where each group solves the other group's problems through a methodological process. So for example, if it's an equation that they need to solve, they need to look at the steps involved in solving that equation, how they reach that solution, how they reached it, and also give some critical feedback. Okay, so could also be based on a rubric or a scoring mechanism where students can give feedback to their other groups or their peers within another group. Okay, where did you go wrong in this process? Or how could you improve? Or how could this process be improved? Or what are the stages you use to solve this process to arrive at this answer, for example, in going through a problem, for example, like in pre-calculus.
Oh, thank you for your question. Thank you for your reply. It is very interesting.